You are watching Omnis Protocol. I am Charles, also known as Omnis. We got more battle report gameplay footage with commentary. Really been enjoying doing these, really been enjoying the feedback from the community. So, another one. I am not playing in this game, though. This is Ryan versus Jake. Ryan is playing Hunter and Obi, and then Jake is playing Mando and Armorer. This was the third round of a small local tournament. At this point, Ryan was locked into playing Obi-Wan and had played Hunter once, Cad twice, Mando once. So he had to play Obi. He had a little bit of versatility, but definitely the Hunter Obi was very much on the table. And then for Jake, he had played, I believe his first round was Kanan and Leia, and then in the second round he played Mando and Armor, so he could play whatever he wanted, and he elected to play Mando and Armor. So overall, like a very, very interesting matchup. You know, the Mando Armor combination does not have that many tools for dealing with Obi. Like the whole identity of shifting back onto points. But at the same time, this table is very elevated. And so that's also doesn't necessarily work to Obi's favor, where he wants his clones to be able to dash back up onto points. So excited for everyone to see how this kind of unfolds. I will preface with, for the first part of this video, you can't see part of the score tracker. This was something I realized while I was monitoring the game, so I tried to find a good spot to move it at a certain point. So you will see it shift into view a little bit better, where I noticed that the angle of camera to terrain was just slightly blocking part of it. So that is something I fixed down the road, and something I will keep in mind for future videos. But let's go ahead. Let's get right into covering this game. Very, very, very excited about it. So Jake did win priority. He's playing the Mando side, and he immediately reveals Mando. He's kind of debating whether or not this is something that he's willing to activate first. I'm going to say that I think this is the absolute worst flip for him. And I would say definitely reserve him. Mando is so key for countering some of the different Obi plays in this situation that I would definitely hold off. But he elects to go ahead and move him. So he does full advance and then clan of 2 to get over within the point, and then is going to just hunker. So if he was going with that play, what I would heavily be considering is hunkering earlier on to make it so that you could potentially maybe move towards a ladder. Where I just think activating Mando, not having Mando actually on the point, I totally get playing the Mando armorless. You have to be very cautious about when you reserve, but I think Mando is just too critically important for this matchup. I think you have to reserve him. They're realizing here that they did miss the opportunity to let Ryan go ahead and resolve the hunter dash, and so they were just getting that out of the way. And then so Rex is the flip for Ryan, and so he is going to do the free dash on Wrecker to get him over towards a ladder and send him up, kind of keeping him very central. I think that's a good spot. If you like playing Wrecker, you really want the potential to hand out that, steadfast bubble as much as possible. And getting a hunker on him is strong as well. So Rex is definitely an interesting first play. I also think if I were in his spot, this would not be what I would want to activate first. And so there's a question of would I reserve here as well? Because I guess really just about everything is fine. It's mostly a question of force. In reality, I would probably just activate Rex, but also, especially with the fact that Mando has already activated, I suppose activating Rex is a perfectly solid choice, but I would think that if with Mando reserved, you would definitely like want to hold back Rex, because Rex is your ability to like just move someone back onto a point that Mando has clanitude off of it. So I think with the current board state, it's a totally reasonable play by Ryan. And so it does allow him to get, a hunker on Wrecker, and then also get him with a hunker up and taking a point. Yeah. So now he's debating as whether or not he wants to shoot Mando. And since Mando did hunker, he was, you know what? I think I'm just going to use the hunker action to get an additional hunker token on Rex, just to make him that much harder to displace. Ryan ends up scoring 2. Jake flips Clan Kreese. And see, I think this would have been a perfect opening for him. I think any character would have been better than Mando, but being able to conserve Mando and then just send those guys towards 2 middle points, I think would have been fantastic, even if they don't get shots. And so here we're going to start seeing how the Mando list can struggle into the extreme defenses of the Obi list, because as Rex is rolling 8 defense dice against this, which is just a tough spot for the Clan Kreese. Like they're good at shooting, but not that good. So on top of that, a particularly bad roll. So all that happens there is a pin and 1 damage. And then the second Clan Kreese is going to go ahead and take a shot at Rex as well. Another not particularly great roll for Jake. And ends up totally whiffing just because the 8 dice on Rex is just too much. So overall, I think at this point, with Mando having already activated, Clan Kreese whiffing to affect any points, I'm already immediately feeling like Jake is in an awful position. I think at the very least, I would have been trying to make a play towards the middle, something to shift that score a little bit, and shooting at Rex has a high probability of doing nothing. I think maybe what he was hoping for was to get like 1 shove, get him closer, and then maybe jump on. But I think he had to like shift that plan with them a bit. So, by the way, it ends up netting him nothing. He just retains control of his back point. So what Ryan is doing, he spends the Force to reserve Hunter, and then reveals Obi. And so he uses the free kind of reserve mechanic that Obi has, where if someone else is in reserve, he kind of hops into that spot, then gets to jump and heal. And so now it's a question of, does he want Hunter on the top and be forced to activate, or put him on the bottom? And so he elects to go ahead and activate Hunter. And I think this is a really solid mixture of activations. Being able to jump Obi and have a Rex activation and a Hunter activation is kind of maximum movement for his team. So it's kind of got that pseudo separatist feel, right? Where you're just getting everybody into position. And that's just a really dominant start for Ryan. And so I imagine Jake having like already whiffed a point and is now looking like he's going to be facing a 4-point score from Ryan. And it's not slouch characters. This isn't a bunch of supports that have just flooded the middle. This is going to be Hunter on one side, Wrecker in the middle, Rex on the other, and everybody hunkered. Like that's just kind of a brutal spot. And honestly, looking at the layout right now, I would be really curious if I could ask Jake why he chose the side of the table that he did. As in retrospect, I feel like it would have been much better to force Obi onto the other side, but maybe there's some subtlety in there that I missed in that selection. So it does end up being a 4-point score for Ryan. So you can see I did switch to red block for the score instead of the clear one, which you can kind of see in the side of the screen. So hopefully make that a little more visible. I was using the AMG score trackers. I'm like, oh, it's larger and maybe it's going to be easier for people to follow on the screen. But that clear cube just sort of disappears. So looking at here, what happens is Jake has revealed Bo-Katan and is trying to evaluate if that's a worthwhile play. And he's debating whether or not he wants to reserve Bo-Katan. So this is where he ends up reserving a character anyway. And so I just would have really liked if this mix of order had been that Mando got reserved and then he activates Clan Kryze and then activates Bo-Katan. Or Mando in there, and like if Mando gets shoved off a point, Bo-Katan, puts him back on. I just think would have been a great position. Well, not necessarily great. I think this is potentially a disadvantaged matchup for Jake, but would certainly help. So with the reserve, he goes into the covert Mandalorians, which is, if you're in his spot, you are probably happy that they came up and not say like Paz. So they advance, kind of checking ranges. They are only range 4, and so there's a little bit of like, maybe we need to shift the positioning of this stuff a bit. In the moment when I was watching the game, I was kind of wondering if he was going to like split and go after 2, but I can see how with the Obi identity and stuff, it seems like there's a high probability that like displacing 2 characters, even though they have great expertise with the interactions of Obi's identity, probably can't get him. So doing both on one side is probably the smarter play, because if he whiffs and gets nothing. So Hunter is still rolling 7 dice, which is a big deal. And he's got the rerolls, so he Hunter blocking 7 is just crazy. And it's honestly like not that crazy of math with the rerolls. So the first roll does nothing. The second roll is decent. So Ryan rolled 3 blocks or 2 expertise, then rerolled 2 to 4 expertise. And so he ends up with 6 total blocks and a recover. And so it ends up only being 1 through. Yeah. I think there's an element there where you're like, oh, this is just bad dice. And while Jake certainly didn't roll great, I think when Hunter's got 7 defense dice and then reroll 2, I think you're going to have those sort of extremes. Like if you're just not getting to crits, you're just not going to do enough. But he does get to shove Hunter at least, and he had a recover on his tree, which is why they didn't put a damage on him. Ryan elects to not use Obi's identity to move Hunter back on since he's controlling the point anyway. Ryan goes ahead and reveals Shatterpoint. So when you're already ahead and then you pull a Shatterpoint, now you're at a spot where like, can you make a big swing and potentially be closing things out? So he was asking Jake kind of like, where is Mando, trying to like keep things in mind, because when you're thinking about closing things out, you're also going like, do I need like 1 wound to gain 1 momentum to like potentially wrap up the struggle? So here Ryan is considering, because if he Shatterpoints Hunter, he can give a full advance to Wrecker, and he can definitely reach the ladder, and it's a question of with Wrecker's big base, can he be range 1 of the ladder and then also range 2? And I don't blame him for going for this, because without being able to put all of the templates down into the exact position, it looked very possible. But once they were fiddling with it, because I was just basically to the right of this game, it's definitely out and was not going to make it, and was actually less close than I thought it would be. But I can understand how from Ryan's position, it was definitely worth going for. So it's a little bit of a risk because now he's going to have used basically everything that can also move Wrecker, because this will be Shatterpoint, Hunter, and Rex have all gone already. So at this point, it's just Hunter going into the covert Mandalorians, which he does potentially have 2 attacks. So this is kind of the full attack, and so he does the converting a fail to either an expertise or a hit on this one. So he just switches 1 to a hit, and he has 2 expertise in the roll. So he gets a crit and a damage out of the expertise. The covert's block 2, which means Hunter is going 3 down his tree. So it ends up being 5 damage, including the expertise damage, and then a shove and an expose. So just opponents working together. He gets the 1 shove, so he's going to follow up the shove. Yeah, he actually uses the little extra tool specifically for shoves. So now he's going to flip sides and do striking distance. And so he's taking the dash from the striking distance. And then this has to be a melee attack. It's 5 dice, and he doesn't get to convert a die on this one. But it doesn't take much to be able to shove him off. So good roll, 3 blocks. The expertise is bypassed because he had expose. So Hunter is able to go 1 down, but it's a damage and a shove on that side. And so he gets exactly what he needs. And then Hunter's going to go ahead and follow up. So it ends up leaving the covert Mandos on 1. And he still has an action because all he did was, it seemed like he did a lot, but he shot, and then he's striking distance for the dash and attack. And so he's in a hunker now, which is a good thing to watch out for. Like, this is the sort of thing when you're playing Obi, anytime you can work in a hunter, it would have been huge. So he ends up 1 away from winning. So if he had either gotten the wound or gotten Wrecker onto the point, then he could have closed out the struggle there. But either way, that's a very commanding spot for Ryan to be in at this point. And so now Jake is electing, like, this is probably as good a time as any to potentially do Bo-Katan. Moving Wrecker off the point is at least maybe opened this up a little bit for Jake. So it's just kind of a question of who does Bo-Katan want to help get further up the board. Both paths and armor certainly appreciate when they get a little extra movement, because it just kind of like presents their ability to threaten a little bit better. But elects to use Bo-Katan to move a covert Mandalorian onto the middle point. So she does a full advance there. And then gets the free focus and dash. There were 2 recovers, but the only thing that she was close enough to at that moment was the Clan Kreese, and they didn't take any damage yet. So that's a free dash from the focus action. So this is where they're discussing, this is not checking a range 4 from Hunter. This is just checking to see whether or not there would be range 1 for her to go up the ladder and be on the point. And they agreed that there would be. So it looks very close on the screen, and like just watching on the screen, I would say probably not in, but they definitely agreed to it and we're fine with that. So that's what we're playing. So Bo-Katan gets up there with Hunter. Gonna get a little melee action going on. So not a great roll from Hunter. 4 fails. So Hunter does get to reroll 2. Ends up with 3 expertise, 1 block. The overall blocking 3. She's going to go 4 down on him. And so where he's going to go on the tree is that he would have damage, jump, 2 shoves. So at this point, they're kind of discussing the shove angles. But they haven't remembered that she needs to actually resolve the jump first. So at this point, they're just going like, which directions can he potentially be shoved? Because they're thinking in this moment that they need to resolve the shoves from there. So it's 5 damage reduced to 4 because of where Wrecker's at. So this is where they clicked in like, oh yeah, we got to resolve the jump first. And so this is where I feel like the jump was a little bit of an afterthought for Jake and should be thinking about Obi's identity. And so in this case, I would have thought a little bit more about where Bo places so that the follow-up can try to land Bo in a spot where no one can go up the ladder. But he doesn't even follow up here. And so it allows Hunter to just use the Obi identity and just dash right back up. And so at the very least, he should have followed up to the edge to try to block that landing zone and see. And I think with the jump plus that, they definitely would have been a possibility. So that can be the little thing, especially if you're not used to playing against Obi, or if you're not prepared for that, that can be a problem. And then the net result there is he's only able to score 1. Or sorry, he scores 2, but it leaves it in an easy spot for Ryan to just close this thing out. So he only needs 3 points to win. He's scoring 3 already. So now he's just kind of considering like overall positioning for the table. So the bow play was good, but I think he really had to try to get Hunter off there and lock that in. I think it still would have been tough, but if he'd scored 3, then it would mean that he would need to score 4, and that would be a lot harder for him to pull off. So it at least opens things up to the potential to swing things back. You know, at this point, Ryan had elected he didn't want to activate Obi, and so he's going with Wrecker. And so he's just kind of figuring out like what does he want Wrecker to do in this moment, and probably doesn't want to wound anyone because wants to save the potential to wound for the next struggle when the score matters. So he uses the free dash, which I believe is called Bulldoze, to move off of that point. And so then he's going to take a shot and try to soften up the Clan Kreese to make them a little bit easier to wound at a different point, which I definitely think is a great target for him. Because he's on so many points, like his ability to threaten the next struggle is very large. And so the more ability that makes the Mando team fragile. So we end up with 3 blocks from the Clan Kreese, doing Hunter's convert to a hit. And the expertise becomes a crit and 2 hits. After the 3 blocks, Wrecker's going to go 2 down. This is where I was like, you know what? We're gonna shift the position of that score tracker to make life easier. And it looks like we haven't quite finished the struggle yet, so we haven't reset anything. No. At this point, so it's just been the dash from Bulldoze and then a shot. So he does have another advance. I do think this is almost certainly a mistake, because he dashes to that middle point, which he is able to get up there. The problem is that this is shifting priorities. That point has a 0% chance of being relevant. So it is like its potential a central point for Wrecker, which is fine, but I would definitely have moved him somewhere else. So the dash was from his expertise, and then he takes a hunker action. So go ahead and switching to the next struggle. Okay. So your reveal here, and this looks like it's going to be a pretty easy pick for Jake, because you either get the side that has Obi and Rex already controlling points, or you go for the spot where at least, I mean, it's rough either way. So you've got Bo-Katan and Hunter kind of like fighting over that middle point. I believe they checked, and Echo and Tech were not in range of that point in the back. So this isn't too bad. But we know Echo and Tech is going to come up soon, and so there's definitely good options for them. So it ends up with the fail, which is obviously not the spot that Jake would have wanted, because that's all the way in the back. So now he's got a big question of like, how is he going to swing the most points? Because he's starting off scoring nothing. And so it's just, what can he get out of this activation? I don't think he's thinking about it in the moment, but I think there is actually a play where Bo-Katan could be strong here, where Bo-Katan could get someone onto a point, and then she has the best ability to go take that back point and actually be on the right elevation, and maybe even can do it without force. Because at this point, Hunter doesn't have a hunker anymore, so she could potentially get him off the point and get like the coverts or armor. Like, yeah, it would definitely be interesting. Like, I would love a Bo-Katan play of moving Armorer forward so that she's starting off contesting that back point. But he elects to go with Armorer and move the covert onto that point, and then he's gonna kind of like go for that point in the back. Man, I think the Bo-Katan play would have been really interesting to see how it would play out, because you get Armor a little further up the table. And as long as she can go 3 down on Hunter, which is certainly not guaranteed, but maybe the Armor is just the more consistent play, and maybe that's worth it when you're behind. Because this is looking like it's going to be a play of Armor just moving, no attack. So she's going to be in a much better position on the table from that Shatterpoint, but she's also not going to be on the right elevation level. So she's just taking cover on. Yes, which is not the activation you want from Armor. I mean, at least he is scoring 3 and he's denying that point right now from Hunter. But I still think Bo-Katan could have been a great play there. Okay, so Jake is able to score 3. Certainly not a bad way to start. Fail flip. I think this is great for Ryan. He's got basically his 2 supports left and Obi, and so he basically, every single activation left in his deck is perfect to go after that point. He elects to go ahead and save Obi, and then it reveals Arfs. In this moment, he's just kind of like double checking with Jake, like, hey, does Armor have any like expertise movement that I have to consider if I'm shooting at her? And she does not. And Paz and Armor are the 2 activations left. That's certainly not bad for Jake, considering where things are positioned on the table. But man, having Mando and Clan Kryze just so irrelevant to basically this entire game is just been a tough spot so far. So Ryan's just sort of deliberating, like, where exactly are the ARFs going to go? You know, what can you mix? And he knows armor is coming up soon. So he's also thinking about, like, what's that impact going to be when armor is back? So he goes for the defensive maneuver. Always happy to get hunker tokens onto the ARFs, which sets up for cool Obi plays. And now defensive maneuver, he's like, who do I potentially want to shoot? And ARFs are range 5, so he's just kind of like checking all of the options. Here he's realizing he was probably going to hunker anyway, and now he's kind of wishing that he had done the hunkering first. Because that guy just isn't quite in the position where they'd want him to be. And he could have potentially gotten to ingress points if he had hunkered first. So now he's just got to finish resolving this defensive maneuver dash. He was double checking, like, oh, she did hunker, so she should have a hunker token, which is what they're correcting in that moment. So finish resolving the defensive maneuver for the ARF. Yeah. So they do go ahead and take cover so that they'll have two hunker tokens. Shenanigans. I think going after the Clan Kreese is smart here, like, because there's such ability to pin them as well, that just like only further inhibits Jake down the road. So it ends up with just 2 blocks. The ARF does get a failure to a hit from Hunter. He had 6 hits and a crit, so he's doing full tree action. Just clearing away like an objective marker that is not relevant in the moment. So it ends up being 5 damage, pin, shove, and expose, which puts a lot of pressure on them. Which does look like they are wounded now. So that's a momentum for Ryan, and now they're resolving the revenge trigger for Mando. He is within range 2, so he just removes the conditions. Always a smart Mando play if you have that option. And then he's going to dash up and engage that ARF. Yeah. So now he was thinking, like, do I want to try to wound the covert Mandalorians? But now Mando's actually in a very relevant spot, and he definitely does not want a second wound now, because Mando could stop him from scoring that back point. So goes ahead and takes a shot at Armorer. Big expertise roll. So ends up changing both of the crits to hits. And so he just ends up going one down. So 1 damage and a pin, which is certainly not a bad, like, just getting her pinned is helpful. So Ryan is able to score 2 by taking that back point. So not a big swing, but still helpful. Failure in the back. So this was an important flip, as he definitely wanted to be armor as 50-50. He did not have the force to reserve. Uses the armor jump on Paz, and then she's going to remove her pin with that jump. So then for her move action, she's going to climb up. You can't see it on the screen at the moment, but he is on the clamp side, not the hammer side for this attack. And so that worried me a little bit. It is the more defensive side, so that certainly helps him. But my gut says switch to the hammer here. Because he's only rolling 7 dice. Not a huge block from the ARFs, but is still getting a total of 3 blocks through. The net results end up being 5 crits, 2 hits, so he's going to go 5 down, which with Wrecker's protection bubble, it perfectly keeps the ARFs alive. And this is where I really think being on the hammer side would have been better. Whereas like this roll is essentially the exact same, because you would a crit would be a hit, which would be negated, but he would also, from the expertise, be able to negate a block. So it would be the exact same, but he would have 1 more die in there. And so I definitely think you were going for that. And there's also a play where, at least on this side, if he had been on that side, he could have shoved the ARF off and then repositioned into a spot to try to block the ARF from being able to go up a ladder and be on the point. I don't know if that's possible, but at least it opens that potential up. But now what happens is he's just not going to impact the point because he doesn't wound the ARF and isn't even shoving them off. And so since the ARF is going to be so low, Ryan is electing to remove both hunkers to give both of the models a heal and a dash. And so just kind of stacking up the bad positioning and not being able to get a big impact on this point. But I think it hits home. I hear a lot of people talk about Armor being this really brawly, really offensive, really wounding focused character, but she rolled well and still didn't wound ARFs. Like, to put it in perspective, she is not that much of a wounding character. So the net result there was that he just scored 1, which is definitely not what you wanted. So now he's kind of elaborating, like, does he go with Obi or does he go with Echo and Tech, which is the last card? Which I think here the smart play is definitely to go with Echo and Tech. Obi's a little out of position to affect the other side of the board, and he would mostly just be like reinforcing, maybe smacking Armor. And so I definitely like the decision to go with Echo and Tech. He hasn't flipped the card yet, but that's the last card in this deck. So now it's just kind of an elaboration of like what is the overall goal with them going to be? Covert Mandalorians are at 1, but there is Mando to think about, and Mando is now like starting in the point where like he could actively impact a point, and it's the most critical point. So if he's going to wound the Covert Mandalorians, he's also thinking about, can he have enough characters on that point so Mando moving up doesn't necessarily matter? Is he going after Bo-Katan? What is the full plan with them? And especially when they have the hunker tokens and they have the extra, hit or expertise from Hunter, they do strong work. Like, defensively, they're okay. Offensively, I feel like they do very good work for a support. And they just stack on conditions. So they tend to frustrate me when I play against them. So that was a defensive maneuver. Get that initial hunker on them. Now they're doing some shoosting. Taking a shot at Bo-Katan. After expertise, Bo-Katan is going to block 3. Ends up with 4 crits, 2 hits after expertise. So 4 down on Bo-Katan is brutal for a support shot. So it's 4 damage reduced to 3. And then there is a shove. I believe it was a total of 2 shoves, 4 damage, pin, and strain, but only gets 1 shove because of steadfast, 3 damage because of protection, but is pinned and strained, which is kind of like a brutal combination. And then I believe this one is a shot at Armorer, seeing if he can soften her up a little bit to help later on. Bad defense roll, or it might have been exposed from the ARFs. It's certainly not enough to wound. It's going to be 4 damage, 2 shoves, and a strain. He gets the activated ability as well, but that's not really something that's going to be super helpful in this moment. And if I didn't say it, there is 2 shoves being resolved. So doing the first one and the follow-up. He's just double checking, make sure his opponent is okay with the angle. Shoves again. And going to follow up again. Just going to bump into the ARF. Yeah. So that's just been defensive maneuver and the 2 shots. So they still have an action remaining. And so they're going to go ahead and take cover. Stack up the hunker tokens. Ends up with Ryan scoring 3 there. Now Paz is going to come up. And so the question is, like, how can he impact scoring? It is Hunter's point where the double score is. So that's at least kind of helpful. He's really happy that it's not the back point. So what Jake is thinking about here is he going to go for the play of going up the ladder and stabbing Hunter? I think in this moment, the right play would have just been to shoot him from there, because he really needs to shove him off. And I think he just has a better chance of actually getting the 2 shoves through with the shot with 8 dice and better expertise than going up there and hoping that the knife gets him shoved off. So it ends up being 5 in a recover overall. So it's just 2 crits through. And so that is not going to be enough to impact things there. And so he gets Paz up onto that point. He softens up Hunter, but then all he gets is to score 1, which is a rough spot there. And it also means he's flip side, so now he's not on the cool pseudo revenge trigger side. So I definitely think you could have either gone for the go up there, stay on the shove side and just roll less dice, but I mean, yeah, my gut says stand there, do the cool Gatling laser gun and try to get 2 shoves on Hunter and see if you get it. All right. And so now he's got to do Obi-Wan. And so it's just kind of a question of where he is going to go. He's already kind of holding most points. Like, can Obi-Wan get all the way back there where the covert Mando is? Not likely. So he's kind of contemplating, can he just get a wound? So he does the jump down and is just going to roll a lot of dice into Armorer. And they're going to expose Armorer and then roll 10 dice into her. She ends up with 4 blocks. Totally solid. Just kind of calculating, getting dice organized. I really appreciate Ryan's, how he's been trying to organize dice for the stream table. The net result is that he's just going to go 2 down. Ends up being 3 damage, shove, and disarm. Just kind of stacking up effects on poor armorer. So here what he's doing is just checking to make sure that because he's going to follow up the shove and making sure he was in the right angle, and then he's going to do a take cover action, kind of going under the terrain. Yeah. I think I probably would have tried to stay out of melee range of her if he could have, and then climbed up just so he was on the point. So here we're at the refresh. Unfortunately, it's the fail, which is back there with the Arfs and Echo, and then gets Bo-Katan as the potential, like, can you take that point back? So Bo-Katan's activated ability is jumping Mando up. And so the big thing here with Bo-Katan is that she is both pinned and strained, which certainly creates a little bit of awkwardness. So there is an option here where she potentially focuses, which would trigger the heal and dash. But it just kind of is a question of like where he's going to go. What he elects to do here is use the jump, which triggers to get rid of the pin, and then heals to remove the strain. Or I believe it just takes the damage from the strain. Advance, and then that'll trigger the focus action and gets to heal 2. Checking range. She's going to take a shot at the Arfs, it looks like. So she's going to go ahead and shoot at Hunter instead, is realizing it's just not impacting that back point. Oh man, Hunter's blocks have just been rough this game. Just ends up dealing him 1 damage. Oh, it's going to be 2 damage, but then he's got a heal, so he's going to remove 1 damage. And so that kind of traps him in a bad spot where he's not impacting the scoring that much. And so now it's 3 points and a wound would potentially win this for Ryan here. I think if Bo-Katan focused to get the heal and then dash, that could have set her up to be in a good spot. All right, so at this point, he's already controlling the 2 points he needs for 3 points. So he really just needs a wound. And looking at the table, you've got armor with 7 damage and some conditions. You've got covert Mandos at 1. So this is already looking like it's probably closing out here, barring like some pretty awful rolls. Echo and Tech with access to expose, and and she's getting, and they're getting the extra hit or expertise from Hunter. This feels like things are coming close to a conclusion here. So they're going to spend the force for the defensive maneuver to have a hunker. And so the resolving the dash, the goal here is just to be outside of range 2 of Mando so that they can shoot other characters. She's just kind of figuring out positioning. What he wants to do is he wants to take gunshots. He's just trying to make sure that both characters don't end up engaged by someone. And there's Mando on that particular point, which is who Tech was trying to avoid, and then Echo is kind of down on the ground and it just wants to dash but stay out of engagement with Bo-Katan. So Hunker, which does give them an additional die, so that just kind of helps lock this play in potentially. So Ryan's just kind of taking a second going like, who shoots first? Because there's always the ability that like if something happens, like how does it affect Mando movement, that sort of thing. So it ends up with Echo, who's on the ground, shooting at the covert Mando, who only has 1 health, and we're doing an expose. So it ends up with 2 blocks, and we've got plenty of successes. And so that's going to go through and wound the covert Mandos, which is all he needed to kind of close things out. This is a situation where if you were to try to like play for wounds or something like that, then you could be in a bad spot because you could end up with 2 Mando triggers, which could actually stop the score. But this is just a bad spot for Jake. I think Order Deck was giving Jake problems, how the priority rolls were giving Jake problems, and it just was like, it was just all stacking up, which not to say that it was all randomless. I definitely think there was some misplays. Whenever you're going into your 3rd plus round of an event, you do wear down. And I don't know how much practice he's had into playing this into Republic. I don't feel like the store that they usually play at ends up having that many Republic games. But man, Mando Armor is going to struggle a bit with Obi Hunter. Now, obviously, this probably looked a little one-sided, and I don't think that would always be the case. I think, obviously, you need to save Mando for the right position. There was definitely also some struggles of just kind of felt like it was easier for the Republic side to get to the key points. And so again, maybe there's some table selection going on in there as well. But overall, I think we're primed to potentially see Obi Hunter come back to the meta in a big way, because people like Hunter the Armor and Mando is a really strong combination. I think people are going to enjoy playing it. It's fun to play. It's strong. And it's, if you don't play really well, you could struggle into the the Hunter and Obi. So maybe even I'll put a little Hunter Obi back on the table again. So very cool matchup. Huge shout out to both Ryan and Jake. I appreciate them letting me futz with the layout and just being able to record a game and then share it with all of you. Definitely some cool plays. I hope this highlights what Obi can bring to the game, and maybe that there are some weaknesses for Hunter. Keep mixing them up in my head, some weaknesses for Mando and the Armorer, because Mando's a bounty hunter, so I feel like I'm saying Hunter for every side. But Hunter comes out on top. Boy, does cool things. And man, that might be the most hunker actions I've seen in 2 struggles. That was impressive. But again, yeah, big shout out to both Jake and Ryan. Loved it. Hope you enjoyed the video. And again, it's YouTube, so the most OP thing that you can do is like, comment, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Later, nerds.